I first encountered street harassment on my 11th birthday. My parents had decided to give me the greatest gift a prepubescent child could wish for, my very first taste of freedom. After years of begging, bargaining, and whinging, my mother finally allowed me to walk down to the local library, all by myself. So, after cake and presents, with a wary eye, excruciatingly detailed directions, and 1,000 warnings to watch out for the traffic, she watched me exit the gates of my colony and turn the corner, out of sight. Elated, I remember striding down the street with my head held high and back straight, eagerly wanting to blend in as a grown-up. Keeping to the pavement, I lugged a pile of books along to the traffic light, jabbed the button, and waited, soaking in the hustle-bustle of the outside world. Businessmen swinging their briefcases, mothers pushing their prams, teenagers tapping away on their mobile phones. Suddenly, I heard a loud, incessant honking, a rarity in my suburbs. Confused, I turned to face a worn-down Mustang, barely 100 feet behind me, packed to the brim with 5 floppy-haired teenage boys, hootering and hollering phrases and making gestures my barely 11-year-old mind could comprehend. I may not have known what to think, but I did know what to feel. Fear. Fear of their arrogance, fear of their vulgarity, but most of all, fear of the way they looked at me. I urged myself to move, but my feet had suddenly stopped working, detached from my mind's will. I could all but watch as the Mustang whizzed down the street, perhaps in search of another pedestrian to harass. I stood there for a moment longer, trying to comprehend what had just happened and why it may have happened. Trying to place this newfound emotion I just couldn't lay my finger on. A mixture of dread, frustration, but most of all, overwhelming humiliation. As my feet finally sprang into action, I found myself turning on my heel and scurrying back into the safety of my colony. I told my mother the library was closed, shut my bedroom door, and spent the rest of the day crying my eyes out. I wish I could say I was the only 11-year-old girl to experience street harassment. But sadly, there are many other girls in different societies, on different streets, going to different libraries. Many other girls who start their journey with a stride, only to end in a scurry. Many other girls who never even reach their destination, in worries of hoots, hollers, and heckles. On more than one occasion, I've been called overdramatic for relating this incident again and again by friends and adults alike. After all, there are more pressing issues, I was told. From the Syrian crisis to Brexit, from climate change to poverty. And anyways, it's not like I was assaulted. I don't even have any physical wounds to prove that it ever actually happened. You see, in today's society, seeing is equivalent to believing. We see the scars left on a rape victim and believe she's undergone a trauma. We see the smog settling over our city and believe that air pollution is intensifying. But what about the scars left on our hearts? The smog settled over our brains. As I entered my teenage years, I found myself revisiting this situation over and over again. Although it seemed unimportant as time went by, I still remembered it vividly as ever. Their faces may have faded, but the words remained echoing in my memory. In fact, over the next couple years, several day-to-day decisions I made were driven by this one single occurrence. I carefully considered every outfit I wore, wondering if perhaps it was too tight, if perhaps it was too short, if perhaps it may attract the attention I so desperately wished to avoid. I used to wonder why I no longer felt safe when walking past a group of men, or while using public transportation, or staying out past dark. But the more I dwell, the clearer it becomes. We say that women are freer than ever to make their own decisions about what they do, where they go, and who they talk to. And yet, we see our fellow mothers, daughters, and sisters going through great lengths to avoid such confrontation. We see them turning up their collars in public, hiding behind a curtain of hair, avoiding eye contact with strangers on the metro, putting bags between them and a passenger on the bus to avoid any sort of physical contact. Are we truly living in a free society where every single choice a girl makes is based upon the possible actions or attitude of men? Street harassment, eve-teasing, catcalling. Call it what you want. This issue has left psychological wounds on more than 65% of women around the world. Harassment is such an embedded concept in our community. Girls are brought up to expect it, to accept it. A major reason behind this is that our society continuously perceives harassment as a compliment. Being pestered by strange men in public has warped into a form of romance, taking shape in the classic story of boy chases girl. Bollywood movies have a large part to play in this perception. I'm sure we've all seen the cliches. A passionate, headstrong boy zipping down the street after his mysterious dream girl, unable to take no for an answer. We perceive this as an endearing gesture. Forget about the girl's downright refusal to be pursued. They see love songs playing in the background. What's not to adore? We believe that women should appreciate the given remarks about their physique, welcoming the critique with an adorned smile and flirtatious behavior. We encourage boys to objectify girls as a part of growing up, a way in which they can discover their masculinity. In turn, men consider this a fun, harmless activity. Perhaps a nuisance, but nothing more. After all, there is no physical harm being done. However, the reality of the situation is far graver. Sadly, many women who choose to stand out against the harassers face grim consequences. Acid attacks, public beatings, sexual assault are only a few steps away from speaking out against the perpetrators. Fear has crippled our ability to fight back, for we trade our right to freedom for safety. Months after my 11th birthday, I remained silent about the encounter. I refused to discuss it with friends or family alike. Somehow, I felt embarrassed, as if I would get into trouble for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the sad truth is, more often than not, the blame of street harassment is placed upon the victims. Young girls are continuously held accountable by the clothing they wear and the time they're in public. But why should you consider me as a sexual object? Why should I have had to focus on hiding the curvature of my body instead of enjoying my childhood? There is no disgrace in being the victim of harassment. The blame must be placed upon the aggressor. Despite our modern society, we have yet to instill freedom for women in public. Fellow women, no longer should we accept harassment as a part of our daily lifestyle. No longer should our stance in society be based upon the harasser's preference. No longer should we scurry aside, but rather stride towards our destination. Parents, I urge you to examine the way in which you tackle these issues. Are you raising your sons to respect women's boundaries? Or instead, prohibiting your daughter's freedom to face the world by herself? Too often, we see mothers and daughters hindering their daughters' independence, setting limits and prohibitions, shackling them to the safety of their households, drawing an invisible line between them and the rest of the world. It is time that we reject this mentality and prove that women have a meaningful contribution to public life. It is time that we take back the freedom stolen from us, and in doing so, claim our stance in society as powerful, assertive, unfiltered versions of ourselves. It is time that we escape the confines of this mentality, change the course of history, and conquer the rest of the world. Thank you.